Everybody, it's Allison Williams here, and welcome to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. As you can see, this week I have some new toys here in my office setup. I have our beautiful boom arm and my new microphone. I'm so excited. I actually feel like a real podcaster now. And I'm hoping that this actually improves the sound quality. As you guys have seen, we have been playing with some different setups to give you guys a new experience, a better experience of the podcast. So I hope this does it. Feel free to, wherever you consume this podcast, let me know. You can either drop a comment on YouTube, you can message us on Facebook, Instagram, or of course, if you're listening on a podcast platform, feel free to email us directly at info@lawfirmmentor.net. All right, so we're going to dive into today's topic, and it's one that I decided that I was going to cover really because we are seeing some trends in our community here at Law Firm Mentor. You know, we are 100 lawyers strong plus at this point. And for all of the law firms across the country that we work with, this is a theme, a problem that we all struggle with. Okay, this is something that I personally struggled with. It was something that I had to learn. It's something that every friend, every colleague, every person that I have ever encountered who owns a law firm has dealt with if they employ even one person. And this is the topic of delegation. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little anecdote as to why this topic is so timely. And then I'm going to give you some strategies on how to deal with delegation from a more effective standpoint. So one of my clients reached out to us and explained that there was friction between one of her best attorneys and one of her best paralegals. And so the question became, well, what is the friction and where did it come from? And ultimately, she laid out a story whereby the attorney acknowledged being challenged in the area of delegation. And the paralegal explained that she had been trying to receive work from the from the attorney. But every time that the attorney gave her something that she purported was time sensitive, the paralegal would try to explain, well, I have something in the process that is time sensitive for another attorney. Where does this fit? Can you speak with that other attorney? Give me some direction. And sometimes the attorney would say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And sometimes the attorney would just say, fine, I'll do it myself. Right. And from a holistic standpoint, right, if you're thinking about your system in a law firm, we can see a whole host of reasons why that is not an effective strategy, even though it does immediately alleviate the concern that the paralegal wouldn't get the work done. It leaves a kind of a stench in the air, if you will, between two professionals. And you don't want to have that. But more importantly, you don't want to have a systems failure that is going to impede the progress of your law firm. And so this particular issue for this particular client of ours presented some interpersonal challenges that we talked her through how to handle. But on the flip side, you know, the next question for that professional, the next question for the attorney that posed that question to us is, well, what if the attorney just does it him or herself, right? Why is it that big of a deal? Sometimes you delegate, sometimes you do it yourself. And I said, absolutely not. we gotta disavow you of that belief right away. So the major problem with delegation is that you have to develop a rhythm for how you delegate, the same way that you develop a rhythm for how you pay your bills, or a rhythm for how you hire your staff, or how you market your law firm. If you just kind of pitch, hit, do it here and there, what tends to happen is you get pitch, hit results, right? Sometimes you get a great result, and sometimes not so much. And the challenge with that is that it becomes really, really challenging from a humanistic perspective to develop a level of faith in what you are doing if sometimes your results are good and sometimes your results are not so good. Right? So as people, we are always going to be operating from a framework that says we want to control what we can control, right? That's a human instinct, really out of self-preservation, because if I know I have control and authority over something and I keep it for myself, then whether I know I'm good at it or not, I'm at least familiar with what my shortcomings are, right? I can kind of psychologically adjust and adapt to them. Every time that you take something off of your plate and give it over to another person, there is the risk, whether it is realized or not, that that person could have some challenges, some difficulties that you're either unaware of or have no present ability to correct for. So, of course, you don't want to take that risk instinctually because you want to be able to control what you can. And our subconscious programming is really designed to keep us safe. And so as soon as we develop a pattern, we become familiar with that pattern, that triggers to our mind that we are safe. And as soon as we start to deviate from that pattern, i.e., give things over to another person, we feel unsafe. Well, how do you develop a feeling of safety when you inherently feel unsafe? Typically, we are looking to external factors that are going to educate us about what makes us safe in that scenario. So in the scenario of delegating, we're going to look to the results that the person to whom we delegated is able to produce. And if that person produces great results, then we start to develop a level of faith, right? But if that person is a human, God forbid, like the rest of us, we start to say, okay, sometimes they do a great job and sometimes they make a mistake. And that mistake is going to educate us that they can't be trusted. That is what our mind is going to say. So we have to practice intentionality around delegating so we can practice the art of growing our faith in other people, and more importantly, growing our faith in the system. So that anytime that you bring in a person to your ecosystem, whether you inherently trust that person or not, you can start to lean into the fact that you have a system that works. And when there is a problem in your system, whether someone doesn't comply with the system or someone doesn't understand the system or simply someone elected not to follow the system, you can pinpoint that, address the problem, have a level of faith in your solution, and continue the delegation process. Okay, so the instinct to take things back is something we want to work you out of. And there's some strategies I want to give you guys that should help with that process. So strategy number one is that you have to explain the why of your system. Okay. Now, this is a very powerful tool. And I think a lot of lawyers get into the mindset of thinking, I'm the owner, I'm the boss, therefore I say do X, you do X, right? It's a very I said so parenting approach to delegating authority and responsibility in your law firm. And sometimes it works, right? Some of us grew up with very authoritative parents that said, I'm the boss here. The way this works is I give instructions, you follow, or there's a negative consequence. So there are a lot of people that will respond positively to that. And therefore, if that is how we choose to delegate, we often will think, so this works for some people and other people are wrong that it doesn't work for them. Well, the reality is what is typically happening with a person who responds well to authoritative responsibility delegation is that person has learned that from somewhere, right? The person who does not respond well either did not learn it or they learned it and are resistant to it because it feels oppressive. So what you want to do is you want to explain the why behind your system, not from a place of saying, I owe it to you to justify why I'm asking you to do something, right? You're not necessarily minimizing your power by explaining, but you are giving people a higher level of motivation to follow your system because they understand it, right? You're instilling in them an approach to doing something that makes rational sense to them, not just I told you so parenting sense to them. Okay. So one of those conversations, I remember I had this conversation early on when I was really learning about the art of better management of people. I had actually taken a course on communication dynamics in the workplace. And one of the things that I learned in that course was actually, it's a college course. I actually put myself back in school for the process of learning this. This was many, many years ago. And I went through that course and I remember bringing the strategies back to the office and I said, let's see if this works, right? I work with lawyers. We are different. That special snowflake tendency is still there. So I said, let me see if it worked. And it was very, very powerful. So I had a lawyer that admittedly told me she does not like to delegate. She's like, I really work better by myself. I get more done, etc. And then I actually took the time to explain why we have engineered the system the way that we have, right? And the explanation answered the question, what's in it for her? And I wanted her to understand that following our system was in her best interest, not just because I'm the boss and I expect it and I require it. And God forbid, if she doesn't do it, she could lose her job, but because I wanted her to see the benefits that are immediate for her if she follows her system. So the conversation went something like this. In our office, we require a certain amount of billable hours for attorneys and a certain amount of billable hours for paralegals. The billable hours for the paralegals are derivative of the work delegated from the attorneys. If the attorneys don't delegate the work, the paralegals don't have enough hours, which means I am paying more for a paralegal than the amount of labor that they are available to provide would suggest is appropriate. And that usually means a reduction in profit. Well, how does that affect you? Well, in the immediacy, it doesn't, right? In the immediacy, it affects the pressure that's being put on the paralegal. That tends to make them more anxious, and that tends to have them make more mistakes. And then you tend to not have as reliable a staff person. But in the relatively short period of time after that, as revenue goes down because they are producing less, because you're delegating less, there's also less revenue available for things like bonuses and firm retreats and fun activities that we do together, like spontaneous lunches or gifts that we will give out periodically to the staff, right? We don't get to do those things if we don't have the money, and you're refusing to do the work that's necessary to delegate to the team actually hampers that effort. But more importantly, on your side, it is a greater deficit to you when you don't delegate, because when you don't delegate the work, you're either going to do the work yourself or the work won't get done. Well, I know how conscientious an attorney you are. That's why you're here on the team. And when you don't delegate the work, that usually means you're going to do it yourself, right? You're either going to do it yourself and bill it to the client, or you're going to do it yourself and not bill it to the client. If you do it yourself and you bill it to the client, then you're overly charging the client. You're charging the client what should be a $150 or $200 task rate at $300 or $400 or $500 an hour. On the flip side, if you don't bill it to the client, then basically you are absorbing those hours, which means the amount of time that it takes for you to bill what is required for your productivity goals is not going to be the same. You're going to slowly increase those hours because you're doing a bunch of work that is secretarial work that you're passing along for free to the client. Well, that presents a whole host of challenges, but for you in the short term, it really is that you are overworking yourself, right? You're either going to overbill the client, so the client's going to be upset, or we're going to write it off, so you're going to be cheating the firm or the client, or you're going to underbill and you're going to be cheating yourself. You're going to be working yourself harder than you have to. So the system that we created was designed around the idea that we only want you working a certain amount of hours to produce productivity goals because we want you to enjoy working here, right? The practice of law is stressful enough without you tacking on additional hours because of lack of efficiency. And we will teach you the protocols for that efficiency, but you have to have at least a level of buy-in to get that we didn't just create this for our economic benefit. We created this for your economic benefit and for your quality of life, right? Now, some people might say, well, that's a really inspiring speech, but in the moment when I really got to get some paperwork out and I don't have a team member that I can rely on to get it done, who's going to do it? Well, here's the challenge with that. What you really have to always be thinking of is, how do I get myself to a place where instinctually I am in a constant state of planning around the system, right? I am acting or working the system. And you do that by following strategy number 2, which is to plan ahead. Okay. Super important that delegation is not one of those things like something lands on your desk and you immediately hand it over to another person. You need to be strategizing what is going to be going from you to your team member so that there is a seamless flow of paperwork moving from desk to desk as tasks are being completed for the benefit of your clients. Now, the way that we do that in this office, in my law firm, is we have a meeting once a week. And typically, the lawyer and paralegal team decide what makes the most sense for them. Sometimes they do it at the beginning of the week, sometimes at the end of the week. But typically, I recommend that it be one of those two, because you want to be planning for the full week ahead. So if you're doing it at the end of the week, you're going to be planning for next week. If you do it at the beginning of the week, you're going to be planning for the week at issue. But your goal is to look ahead to the calendar, look ahead to the deadlines that you have, and make sure that you and your team member are having a constant communication about what needs to get done, so that when that person knows, when your team member knows, okay, we got papers that have to go out on Wednesday and it's Monday afternoon and I don't have them yet, I need to be reminding my team member, hey, I got to get this done. When are you going to have me your piece of it so I can get to my piece of it? Right? And that tends to cut down on the urgency of, hey, it's 9:00 in the morning and I got to get this done by 9:30, right? Or it's 4:00 in the afternoon, I got to get this done by 4:30. You want to be able to strategize to avoid the urgency that is created by a lot of people simply not having good time management skills or simply not communicating with their team member. All right, third and final strategy, and this is one that I know is tough for a lot of law firm owners, is you really have to empower others to be a force for your delegation benefit. Okay, that usually means the person to whom you're going to be delegating, you have to tell them to push back at you when you don't follow your own system. Now, for a lot of people, I know that's a really triggering idea, right? I don't want to have my team member talking back to me. I don't want my team member to resist my instinct to do it my way. But here's the thing. If you're trying to create a new habit, you have to put everything in place in order to support your new habit. And your team member, the person who will also benefit ultimately from the delegation, right? They benefit by having enough work to do so that their job is viable. They benefit by virtue of not being bored in the workday, sitting around with nothing to do. They benefit from making sure that the firm is financially successful because that affects their financial success as well as their job security, right? So everyone gets something out of it. And you'd be surprised how demoralizing it is for a person when you hire them to do a job and then you don't let them do it. So you want to get into the habit of getting your team member on board with the fact that you have a system and that you want them to follow the system. And if you hire well, which is something we're going to talk about, we talk about hiring a lot here at Law Firm Mentor, but we're going to talk about that in a whole separate series. But if you hire well, you're going to be hiring people that actually want to take the reins. They want to be the leader of their desk. They want to be the greatest asset to you. And the people who are the greatest assets to you are allowed to be so. And you're the one who ultimately allows that. You are the one who brings them into the fold of being their best selves by telling them, but also showing them and empowering them that delegation is something that we all have to be on board with. All right, everyone. I'm Allison Williams, your Law Firm Mentor. You've been watching another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. I'll see you on our next episode.